Hey everybody, Ro here with a cool new video on how to record bass guitar for your home studio, be it rock, metal, jazz, funk, or what have you. While you guys might have followed along and seen some of my tutorials before, obviously in 4 years I've learned a ton about all sorts of new mixing ideas and tutorials, and I just really wanted to pass along the most general but useful information possible for the bass guitar. Again, while this video is going to be very generalized, it'll show you guys what I do. There's going to be 4 real steps here. You're going to want to choose your bass well, you're going to want to play your bass well, and then you're going to want to record it as proper as possible, and finally we're going to mix it well. And if you follow these 4 steps, no matter what you change about your setup, your playing, or the song, you should have a very consistent and honest tone that you'll be happy with. The first step I want to go over is choose well. Because we need to choose a really good bass, but you know, how much money should a real good bass cost? I say it's more about the setup. It's more about what you need and what's set up physically well and what's comfortable. I'd say if you had a 4-string bass and you were, you know, a metal player and you were dreaming of having some super low, scary tuning monster bass, you don't have to worry about any of that, because a good bass is set up and comfortable to play, just like a good guitar is well set up and comfortable to play. I also suggest you look into things like the types of pickups, as well as the scale length, and try to figure out what you want. For me, because I play so much rock and metal, I ended up wanting a active pickup bass. Active pickups basically mean that there is a battery creating a powered circuit in this bass whenever it's plugged in. And the sound is a little more aggressive. So you end up getting like a little more power than if you had a passive bass, or if you had a bass that lets you turn off the active circuit, which will give you a bit of a darker, maybe more akin to 70s R&B or even jazz sound. So it really just varies with the color of your sound. And another thing to consider there is the price point, because active pickups will mean you have to buy a battery every once in a while, and of course the basses that are created to be active might be a little more expensive, especially if you're starting out. Another thing to consider is the longevity. I purchased a used bass that would normally cost maybe around $500 US, and it's lasted me something around like 4 years now. And I've only had to maintain it once or twice seriously, and then replace the jack. And of course you should always treat your instruments well. Another thing to always check up is if your action is too high or too low. You want it to be comfortable for you, and just depending on the kind of playing you do, especially if you're doing something like slap oriented, or if you're just a little less aggressive, you want the action usually to be, you know, fairly low, but it'll vary for your hands. You want your bass to be yours, so I tend to keep my action moderately low, but I keep it high enough to where I'm not getting any fret buzz. Lastly, you want to make sure that your bass is actually producing the sound. So what I mean by that is plug in your bass into either your interface for recording or your amplifier, and you want to make sure that you're not getting any crackles or like a very weak sound. If this is happening, you either need to replace your battery if you're using active pickups like myself, or you might need to increase the input gain. I use a Focusrite Scarlett Solo for the past 2 years, and the input gain knob has usually been around halfway or higher in order to get the full sound. One of the most important things is if you're recording a signal fairly hot, you avoid the noise or the sound to noise ratio. While there's a huge electrical engineering study on this, the simple version is there's going to be noise in your signal, period, that little sound. But if you play louder than that, the amount of music coming through versus the amount of that sound is just so big that we can ignore the sound. Of course, you don't want to have clipping where your volume has hit so high that it becomes unreproducible without having static or crackles or gross noise. So you tend to want to hit as high as possible and then test it. I'm not clipping on my Axifex here, so I can tell that I have enough headroom to keep playing at the way I'm playing. Now this is the part of the video that gets probably the most annoying because it's going to require the most work from you. You will not get a great sound unless you are playing a great sound. And of course there's this whole philosophy of tone is in the hands and or in the fingers, and people scoff at this very often because they're not sure if they can make a great sound out of, you know, a crappy instrument or some other issue. And they are right. It is important to have all of these things taken care of. You know, a comfortable instrument that, you know, produces a very versatile sound and an interface that doesn't produce some sort of issues. You know, select your drivers. This isn't quite the video for you guys wondering how do I fix my bugs, but when you record, you want to have the cleanest and best take possible, and performing a very good bass part will take away all the issues of mixing and wondering, where is the bass, or I don't really feel like this part really matters, or I'm just trying to copy what the guitars did and tuck it away under. It just depends on the music you're writing. Bands like Tesseract, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Tool, sometimes even Metallica, Iron Maiden, they all thrive on these very rich bass lines that contribute to the song actively, meaning you can hear the bass being performed and you can feel it gone if you were to just, you know, drop it. And just as important, it's playing towards the song, and that's what I think is the most important thing. There's a few tips I can give for playing bass without giving a formal bass lesson that I recommend for you. One of them is play dynamically, and what that means is if your song is very somber and slow, don't start smashing and plucking your bass guitar. You want to have this conducive bass line, and you don't have to go at it. I use 45 to 130 D'Addario NYXL bass strings, and using a medium gauge allows me to have some sort of pressure. But what it's really doing is also giving me just enough tautness to where I'm not fighting the bass to play it. And I can play like soft notes just by using the fat of my fingers. Something Motowny like that really benefits from you not going crazy at your bass. Another tip is if you were using something like a pick, and I recommend using a slightly thinner pick than what you would use for guitars, just so that the tuning of the bass stays very stable. Something that lets you pick very flat. And one of the things that's very important here is if your song has a lot of hits to it, then that's where you do want to give it a little more energy. And having that sort of range of dynamics will give your song so much more life than if it's just this flat brick of performance. Of course, another important thing is you need to be good at this instrument, just like you're good at any other instrument. Practice some major and minor scales. Try alternate your fingers, not like what I just did. And you know, give yourself some bass lines. Go look up 100 best bass lines of rock and roll, 100 best metal bass lines, and try to learn some of your favorites. Even if they're tricky, just slow it down, open up a metronome. Give yourself 5 or 10 minutes every time you pick up this bass to just do 1, 2, 3, 4 on every string. One of the last things I can also tell you, in addition to playing comfortably, is if you're using a strap, you can always hold it a little higher. Don't make your hands have to like sit down here below the camera to try to pull off some James Hetfield style playing. You want to be comfortable and you want to have access to your instrument. I also try to play around the middle here. If you play close to the neck, you might get a little more speed at the exchange of maybe like a little darker tone. But if you play towards the end, like, you get a little more definition. So you can decide just based on where you're comfortable with and what sound is coming out, where you want to play and place your hands. Last, of course, I think you might have noticed how I'm playing, but when you're recording or even performing, there are times where you do not need or want the bass to be making noise. For example, if you're sustaining a note, maybe at the end of a huge power chord, and you go, you know, there's some sense to it. But if you're doing something where you want to really lock into the drums, like, and what I'm doing there is I'm practicing nubbing my finger just down onto the string here so that I can mute it. Because one of the most dynamic and what I would consider almost like loud and breathing techniques you can have in a song is going from soft to loud to soft to loud. It's kind of what makes dubstep exist. The fun of having dynamics is just that there's an absence of sound and a presence of sound back and forth. So the last thing I would say about play well is you're going to want to maintain this instrument so that you can perform well. I would suggest changing strings depending on how you play, especially if you're just a home studio musician like myself. Give yourself a shot at changing it, you know, every 2 or 3 months. I know strings are expensive for bass. This pack of strings itself is like $30 US, but the difference in sound is that they get this ability to be brighter. The feel of it is much smoother to the skin because it has less you know, oil and skin cells and all that other gross grime. And even when you're playing with strings, it's always a good idea to just kind of get a cloth or something and wipe it down when you're done performing, and wash your hands. This is easily one of the weirdest, best advice I could give you for playing music. I mean, in general, you should wash your hands. You don't want to spread germs, but absolutely keeping your hands nice, clean, dry, but you know, moisturized or whatever you want to do. It just creates a completely different experience when you are playing an instrument, especially if you're just staying up till 4 a.m. working on some song and you're just like, this isn't happening. Your hands should be nice and comfortable. Every part of this experience can be improved and comfortable. Now record well. Once you have your bass set up, you're comfortable, you can play, you've gotten these really great parts written out that complement the song, you're going to want to record it in the best way possible. Now, I'm just a kid sitting in his bedroom and recording into a computer, but I feel like you don't need a huge studio to get sounds from, you know, music that I listen to all the time. You know, things like Animals as Leaders, Pliny, C2IA, all these great, almost home studio recording musicians. They don't need these huge amp pegs and cabinets and experimentation. A lot of them are just getting away with amp simulation or the DI signal or the direct input signal. Now, many people suggest purchasing a DI box or a direct input box, and they're fantastic as well. What I have is the Scarlett Solo, which is a small interface that lets you plug in one instrument input and one microphone input. And this is just perfect for me. Until I recently purchased my Fractal Audio Axe FX2, I was completely satisfied recording into the Scarlett and then recording a dry signal or a DI signal of my bass. And right now you're probably going to be able to hear a little bit of it. What you're going to want to do, of course, is avoid clipping and all these good things. And you're going to want to kind of adjust your equalization knobs on your bass. Right now I try to keep it maybe 60% on the neck and on the bridge, and then with my 3 low, mid, and high, I try to keep them at 50% and then adjust from there. I find too much low end going into the signal will create this boominess, and once I add the amp sim, I can retain quite a lot of that absolute sub bass. For those of you guys who aren't sure about how equalization works, I suggest looking up equalization spectrum picture. I'll try to post one in the link, and it'll show you where instruments sit as far as like the sound, you know, the low end, the bass, and the high end, the trebles, and all the sibilants, and you just get this much richer picture as you understand how that all works as well. And once you're recording in with a DI signal, we can reamp it later. So it's just really good to have a very clean and clear signal without even worrying about what it's going to sound like a little bit later. The main part of Mixwell, I'm going to show you guys inside Reaper what kind of settings and the kinds of plugins that I'll use to really sit a bass into a very basic mix. Now that we're in Reaper, my digital audio software of choice, I wanted to show you guys briefly how I approach mixing bass guitar in what I consider to be like a light rock project, just to have a little bit more of a universal understanding of what I like to do. So just look at the bass bus, which is like a collective track. We have the DI, the direct input. It's recorded in stereo because I used the Axe FX, but by all means, this is a mono track. And then I have the amped signal. So I have basically two signals to play with. This is the exact dry signal that you will get through the Scarlet series or the Line 6, just as dry as it comes. And if you want to hear how it sounds, all we have to do is click solo on that. And I should probably just play through it normally. This is a second version of Mission Street from Sonic Adventure 2. So, not very refined, but the bass is functioning as kind of like a way to stable with the groove. It's matching the kick drums especially, and it's getting quiet when we need it to with the use of muting. So the DI signal sounds like that, but the amped signal gives us a lot more depth. So I'm going to try to mix both of these differently, just to show you guys what kind of tone we create for this amped bass signal. Let me open up Axe Edit, which is what my Axe FX 2 XL uses. Right now we're on the Ropan grilled bass tilapia tone that I created, and the first thing we have is a noise gate. This one I set to -56.2 dB. Now when you're setting a noise gate, you just need to, see how much hiss and noise is coming through your signal when you're not playing, or even when you're playing, you can tighten this up. And there's not too much more logic here besides I just want this to be fairly quick, but not ultra immediate. Then I'm using a compressor as like a studio compressor. If you guys are using Pod Farm or even Bias Effects, Guitar Rig, it's essentially a rack style compressor, and this one is basically acting moderately soft. I could go as high as 3 or 4, but because I recorded this signal wet, changing this isn't going to change our mix right now. But the idea of the compressor is to even out signals, and if you watch my next video, created special this week, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what is a compressor, why do I need to use it, and what are all these crazy knobs. But essentially it makes the loudest notes a little softer, and the softest notes can be a little louder. The simple way of putting it is it evens the sound. Then I have an amp simulator of, it's called the SV bass amp here. And we're basically giving it a little bit of drive, and this pushes the signal, gives it a little bit of like acceptable distortion. And then I'm just equalizing it the way I personally feel I would want it to be heard. And the way it fits the mix is these guitars are kind of, they're kind of bright. So I do want a little more low end, but I don't want it to be so separated that we have this huge gap. So I do bring out some of the brightness of my bass here. And then we have a cabinet simulation, which is like a big speaker. So I'm using the LA bass. It's a 1x15, so it's like a tall rectangular speaker being microphoned by an SM67 condenser microphone. And what this does for us is that it'll create this sense of a little bit of the boominess. It'll sound like it's being performed in a room, and I'm just trying to like shake the foundation almost without overpowering the rest of the song. So that's how my tone looks like for this. Again, not really mixed, but what we're going to do is end up mixing it. For those of you guys using cheaper but just fantastic alternative, Bias Effects, I cannot praise them enough for their cost point for the simulation. Easily the best amp software you will find, in my opinion. We have a noise gate going in around like halfway here, And I have one signal that's got a little boost pedal going on, a little bit of gain, a lot of volume just to drive up the signal. And these amps are turned off. So all you end up hearing is an equalized sound, kind of boosts the low end here, and it's blended with treble boosted and compressed signal here. And this is called Swig's bass. I believe it's called Dry Biscuits bass tone. So you can get this on the Tone Cloud absolutely free, and you can use it. You can credit me in the description or not, I won't know. So if you want to hop in, play with my tones, please do. There's tons of them on Tone Cloud. But then we're going into a GK800 bass amp, and the cabinet itself is 2x10. It's called the Bass Pro here. Used a C414 mic. And this is basically just trying to get a signal to sound like my amped bass one. So while it's not as powerful or realistic, it is absolutely phenomenal for the cost, and I think it's perfect. I've been using bias effects for a while. And then the equalization here is a little bit more boosts on the high end to compensate for the low side here. So I'm going to turn that off when we start to mix this bass. But I'm going to add Re-EQ, which is an equalizer, and basically we can control the frequencies in this program. So I'm going to add a high pass here. And the only reason I have that there is because I don't want too low frequencies to get in. And I'm going to do the same with a high pass, with a low pass on the upper end here. And I'm just going to raise it up a little bit, and we're going to check out how it looks. So what I'm doing here is getting rid of all of this guitar and crash cymbal areas because we don't really need it that much, especially the amp signal where things will be brighter. And I'm just going to like hunt down some areas where the guitars come in and try to blend that. Half bad. Now we can do the same with the DI, where we can add equalization to that, but we're gonna have to raise it quite a bit. And let me do that. Turn off the bias effects, and we have this like very precise low end, so it's really nice to have the DI to play with. And because we have the amp signal going on, we may not even need too much of that. And that brightness is coming from this amp side. So nothing is sticking out too weirdly. That is the goal that I want to get to. So just because I'm going very briefly here, last thing I want to show you is how I would compress both of these tracks. So while I have, again, this video on compression, this is literally the simplest compression that we could ever need. So I'm going to select this area and loop through it. And I'm going to lower the threshold, which is basically where I want to start lowering volumes. You know, if you get to this point, I want you to go down. So let's start here. Now, what is this ratio? The ratio is how much I want you to go down when you hit this spot. So for every, let's say, 1 decibel of volume that goes past my threshold, that goes past the gates, I want you to shut down, let's start with like 3.3. And this is called the gain reduction. How much volume is being pushed down and what we would say almost lost, and the quality of the sound is going down in a way as a result of your compressor. So if it's here, we're not pushing down anything, but if I start smushing, look at that, we compressed everything. So I like having it around like -2 or 3 just to like get a feel for what my compressor's doing. The attack is how fast we're going to have that happen. If I really want some spikes in the transients, in the the accents of the song when it gets louder and softer afterwards, you might want to play with the attack being a little slower, and the release can get it back. So it's just really up to you. And again, what I'm doing might be something I completely change in 3 months from now, but I'm pretty happy with my sound. Not to where I won't change it, but at least to where I feel comfortable suggesting it. So in short, that's kind of how I get the bass sound I want. Now, if I were to make this into some sort of rock anthem, then I would traditionally create a distorted track. Actually, what would be best is I would create a distorted track out of this DI track. And to do that, we do this. And then all I have to do is add some sort of distorted effect, and we'll do that before you. And for those of you guys with amp sims, this would be the best part. You can start distorting it there, but you can sit it underneath. Just softens up the low end. Now this is by no means my distorted track at all. The thing is, I would record it through my Axe Effects using Guitar Amp Sim or something like that. This isn't necessarily meant to be a tone tutorial, but this is the principle of copying it down so that we have this strong mono performance, and then we can produce a distorted track. Or if you're very comfortable with amp processor like an Axe Effects or a Line 6 Helix or what have you, try making your own distorted singular tone and just reamp through that by running the dry signal back into your device. I hope this is a good overview of kind of how I would quickly get bass mixed and lock it in with the other sounds without making you watch an hour tutorial. Now that you guys know what a compressor is, how I record, how you can write bass lines that fit a little better, and have all these general tips, I think it's just about time to start recording your own bass, or record a better version of your bass using some new techniques and ideas you got. Feel free to show me on Twitter at SwigglesRP, or post on my Facebook page, facebook.com/SwigglesRP. I love seeing what you guys do with any of my videos, and I just, love the bass guitar, and I think it's going to be a really cool sound when you can record it and love the sound you're getting, be it for jazz, funk, rock, metal, or what have you. Thanks so much. Check out more of my tutorials in this tutorial playlist, or check out some of my covers, and maybe you'll like the bass that I'm doing in there. Thanks.